Welcome back to another episode of Reed and Reed's Slater Hall Sports Hour. I'm Reed.
I'm Robert. It was a busy week in the NFL, week 2 of the season. Also a big week in college football, highlighted in our minds by Iowa getting a big win over UNI. Listen to the whole podcast in its entirety or look in the description to find the timestamps to hear whatever you want to listen to.
So we're just going to jump right into it. Iowa's 38-14 victory over the UNI Panthers.
Yeah, offensively, it was one of the best offensive games that Brian Ferentz has called since he was promoted to offensive coordinator. A dominant game for Nate Stanley. Best game for him of the year so far by far. He went 23 for 28, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns. Bad interception before halftime, but the defense responded right away. Got a field goal before the half, so that favored in the game.
Another thing that the offense really highlighted was the running back duo of Mekhi Sargent and Torrin Young. And Mekhi Sargent really looked like a starting Big Ten running back this week. And compared to previous weeks, it was more Torrin Young and Ivory Kelly-Martin. And this week, I think Mekhi Sargent showed that he deserves more carries than he's getting right now.
And passing-wise, Nick Easley emerged as Nate Stanley's favorite target this week. He caught 10 balls for over 100 yards and had a touchdown in there as well. Noah Fant also proved dangerous in the red zone with another touchdown this year. And the passing game really started to come together, which is important now that we're entering Big Ten play. Another thing that stood out for the Iowa team this week was their defense. Another good game from their defense. They allowed some garbage time touchdowns at the end, and that's a thing they're going to have to focus on moving forward because it happened in the Northern Illinois game, happened in this game, but not a big issue. The defensive starters look good. A.J. Epinesa had another sack. There were 3 total of them for Iowa in this game. They held UNI to 6 rushing yards, which is just amazing. I know we expected the Iowa defense to dominate this game, but 6 rushing yards is tough to manage no matter what your opponent. And now that Wisconsin's coming to town next week off of their loss to BYU at home, they'll be angry. Let's see if the Iowa defense and offense can combine for another good game next week. Now that we've recapped the Iowa game, their beatdown of UNI, we move now to the NFL schedule for week 2, opened by Baltimore at Cincinnati in a Thursday night football matchup that saw Cincinnati emerge victorious.
AJ Green was the big story. He had 3 touchdown catches in the first half of the game, on his first 3 catches actually, but then went silent after that. Another big piece for the Bengals, Joe Mixon did sustain a knee injury, and he will be out for the next 2 weeks, but he should be back. And on the Ravens side, John Brown has looked good so far in his new role with the Ravens. I think the change of scenery from him from Arizona to Baltimore has been good for him.
Yeah, there's good and bad for Joe Flacco this week. He had 376 passing yards and 2 touchdowns against the Bengals, but counter that with 2 interceptions, a fumble, and he was sacked 4 times. It was there were good and bad to Joe Flacco. That's what's happened most of his career, with some pressure coming behind him from Lamar Jackson. Let's see if he can get more to the good side than the bad.
Next game at noon on Sunday was Atlanta beat Carolina 31-24.
Yeah, Tevin Coleman had a big game, 107 yards rushing in Devontae Freeman's absence due to injury, and that's kind of the story. Whenever Freeman's been out, Coleman's really shown that he's capable of being a running back 1 in the Atlanta offense. Matt Ryan really stood out. He had 4 total touchdowns. He said it's probably the first time ever he's had 2 rushing touchdowns in a game, which is interesting for an experienced NFL quarterback, even if he lacks a certain bit of mobility.
And on the Panthers side, Christian McCaffrey had 14 catches on 15 targets. I think the Panthers offense is really showing that losing Greg Olsen and not having really a stud number 1 receiver, Devin Funchess is the closest they have to that. Christian McCaffrey's catching a lot of balls this year for the Panthers.
Yeah, Cam definitely needs some help on offense. It was kind of a one-man show other than dumping it off to McCaffrey, and he took some hits. Whenever he runs, he seems to take a heavy number of hits. If he wasn't a physical specimen, he'd probably be hurt by now, but I wouldn't rely on Cam being healthy forever. Next game on the slate, the Indianapolis Colts defeating the Washington Redskins on the road 21-9.
Andrew Luck got his first win at quarterback since 2016, and the Colts looked better than they did last week, and the Redskins looked very poor considering how dominant they looked last week against the Cardinals. Jamison Crowder was actually their leading rusher at 2 rushes for 29 yards. So that's definitely signs of worry over there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Smith played fine. Their only threat on offense was Chris Thompson. Nothing in the regards to rushing. I believe he had 4 attempts for 1 yard or something in that nature. He did have 13 receptions, I believe 14 targets, so he caught everything that was thrown, mostly everything that was thrown to him, and he tried to provide some sort of offense for that team, but Colts defense shut him down the whole game.
Next game is the Tennessee Titans defeated the Houston Texans 20-17, and once again, Deshaun Watson looked very turnover prone. He had an interception and 2 fumbles that the Texans did recover, but you can't be putting the ball out there that much. And Will Fuller returned from injury this season for the first time with 8 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown, and that's something the Texans really need behind DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, Watson looked good when he wasn't turning the ball over, but that's the big thing. He was turning the ball over, didn't give the Texans a great opportunity to win, especially when the Titans were missing Marcus Mariota. They're running a wide variety of plays. They had a fake punt touchdown. They ran the Wildcat offense so Blaine Gabbert could throw as few passes as possible, and that led to the Titans' win.
Derrick Henry completed a pass. So he doesn't catch passes, but he does throw them.
He will throw them. He's capable of throwing them. Now we move to another shocking game in the early NFL season. Fitzmagic strikes again. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers take down the Philadelphia Eagles, defending Super Bowl champions.
Once again, as it cannot be stated enough, Fitzmagic continues. He had another 400-yard, 4-touchdown game, and Deshaun Jackson looked very good again in back-to-back games for a lot of long receptions, and Mike Evans also looked good, and they got almost nothing from the running game. So Ryan Fitzpatrick has been immensely valuable to this Buccaneers team.
Yeah, the Bucs had 2 75-yard touchdowns this game. The first coming on the first offensive play of the game for the Bucs. Deshaun Jackson, still fast as ever. O.J. Howard had another one, just fighting off defenders. On the Eagles side, Jay Ajayi was injured, missed most of the game. We'll see if he plays next week or in the coming weeks. But the big news for the Eagles, Carson Wentz is back next week from injury. We'll see if he revitalizes, re-energizes the Eagles offense after a shaky performance in Tampa Bay. We continue to our next game on the Pat Mahomes MVP tour. Kansas City Chiefs at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Kansas City Chiefs offense looked good once again.
Patrick Mahomes threw 6 touchdowns, and he looked to have more, but the Chiefs once again went into conservative mode. Travis Kelce looked much more involved this week compared to last week, where he only had 1 catch. He had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the week. But the alarming part for the Chiefs is they had the game all wrapped up at 2 different spots, but their defense let the Steelers back into it. Big Ben threw 60 passes, and the Chiefs look like a Big 12 team right now, all offense and practically 0 defense.
Yeah, Chiefs got up early in the first quarter, 21-0, but couldn't quite keep the Steelers out of it. Big day for Big Ben through the air. He had over 450 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and this is all coming with the turmoil inside the Steelers organization at the moment. So Chiefs offense looks good. Let's see if the defense can step it up a little bit.
The next game, the Miami Dolphins continue their hot 2-0 start to beat the New York Jets 20-12.
Yeah, a little bit of a step back for Darnold after his shining debut on Monday Night Football. He just too many mistakes for the Jets. It was, like I said, a step back after week 1. Darnold threw 2 interceptions. The team had 4 total fumbles, and that's just not a recipe to win games, even if you are playing the Dolphins of 2018. But yeah, the Dolphins going 2-0, I wouldn't have predicted that. That might be the total number of wins I projected for them on the season, maybe a couple more. But yeah, I certainly didn't expect the Dolphins to go 2-0.
The only thing I have to add is Ryan Tannehill once again looked pretty decent. No interceptions, 2 touchdowns, and a win. Ryan Tannehill's back, baby.
And another exciting, if you want to call it that, game on the NFL slate, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Buffalo Bills.
Bills are going to Bills. It was actually a total blowout, but the Chargers ended up giving up 20 points somehow to the Bills. Rivers was very efficient. Melvin Gordon had 3 touchdowns, but he did come out with injury, so that's yet to be seen. But it went about as you'd expect this game, Chargers versus Bills.
Yeah, like my co-host mentioned, the game was not as close as the score indicated. Buffalo, once again, looks like the worst team in the league. Having Josh Allen in instead of Nathan Peterman might have helped a little bit, but they're still far and away, and at least it appears thus far, the worst team in the NFL.
The next game up, one of the most exciting games of the week, despite the score, was the Packers and the Vikings tied again at 29-29.
Yeah, 2 weeks into the season, 2 ties. I don't know if I expected that at all this season. In fact, I did not. It was a good day overall for both quarterbacks, both Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, even though he was on one leg, once again played well. Late in the game, Cousins connected with Adam Thielen on an insane touchdown. I don't know how that ball was not picked off. And then he and Diggs connected for the 2-point try. But the overall story of this game, after it was all said and done, was probably missed field goals. Crosby missed one late in the game. And Minnesota's kicking situation, Vikings fans probably don't want to hear about it anymore, but they missed field goal after field goal. I believe there were 3 total missed field goals by the Vikings kicker in that game, and it cost them in this one.
To me, the big story was Clay Matthews' controversial roughing the passer call that that got rid of a Kirk Cousins interceptions on the last drive that led to the Adam Thielen touchdown. This, if you go and watch the video, this is about as clean of a hit as you can have on a quarterback, and he's still in his throwing motion. They said he put his weight on top of the quarterback, and that made it roughing the passer as Kirk Cousins was releasing it. It's just ridiculous right now what the calls the referees are having to make.
Yeah, I don't know how the defensive players are supposed to go about tackling. That was a textbook hit on the quarterback, not dirty at all. It was just a good hit by Clay Matthews. Next game, the Saints narrowly avoid starting 0-2 with a 21-18 win over the Cleveland Browns.
My only comment is kicking. Zane Gonzalez missed 4 kicks, 2 extra points, 2 field goals. The Browns very easily could have had their first win since 2016, and they Brownsed the game away once again.
Could have ended the winless streak, but that was just too good to happen. Since they tied last week, I kind of thought they'd start the season 0-2, which would be very Brownsy to do. But yeah, like I said, Saints were lucky to avoid an 0-2 start to the season, and I didn't know what was going to happen after Tyrod Taylor threw a bomb to Callaway, on 4th down late in the game. I mean, obviously Zane Gonzalez missed kicks after that, and they couldn't get the job done. But Browns look vastly improved this year, but they still don't have enough coaching-wise or player-wise to actually make big plays and win games.
Next game is the 49ers defeated Matt Patricia's Lions 30-27, continuing Matt Patricia's winless streak as head coach.
Yeah, off to a bad start thus far. Matthew Stafford actually looked much better than his putrid performance on Monday Night Football. He brought him back in the 4th quarter after a fairly large deficit to only lose by 3. But that said, the running game and the defense, 2 things that you'd think Matt Patricia, a defensive-minded head coach, would want to bring to the Lions. Those 2 areas need to vastly improve quickly if the Lions want to have any shot this year.
Just as he said, my main takeaway was the Lions didn't look nearly as bad on offense as they did against the Jets. Stafford broke some fantasy hearts last week, but he looked much more like himself this week.
Now, moving just across California a little bit to the site of the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams in a nail-biting 34-0 game.
I don't have much to say on this game. Rams doing Rams things, the best team in football. They're stacked about everywhere except for linebacker, and it went about as you expected.
Yeah, Gurley had 3 touchdowns. Goff was sharp. The defense, obviously, due to the shutout, they dominated the game. Cardinals looked bad. Good start for the Rams. Now we move to maybe the highlight of the AFC games for this week, the New England Patriots at the Jacksonville Jaguars.
The Jaguars came out with a chip on their shoulder, it looked like. They felt like they had something to prove. Down there, 97-degree weather. Seems to be Tom Brady's his only weak point is the hot weather in Jacksonville. But
yeah, okay. He was only 8-0 against Jacksonville at this point.
Josh Gordon will help against tough defenses like that. Take the pressure off guys like Chris Hogan and Gronk, who was non-existent after his huge performance in Week 1. So another AFC Championship preview potentially right here.
Yeah, for sure. Bortles looked sharp on the day. He had 4 touchdowns overall. On the New England Patriots offensive side, Gronk, as previously mentioned, had a quiet day. Sonny Michel in his NFL debut was a little bit anticlimactic, never had a big play in there. Chris Hogan did have 2 second-half touchdowns that kind of brought the Patriots back into it a little bit, but it just wasn't enough against that great Jacksonville defense to actually give the Patriots a shot to win this game.
The last Sunday afternoon game was the Oakland Raiders stay winless in the John Gruden era, dropping a late lead to the Denver Broncos 20-19.
Yeah, rough start to the second era of Gruden football in Oakland. It looked like they were going to get this one done, but no, the Denver Broncos come back, led by Case Keenum in the second half to overtake this game. McManus hit a game-winning field goal with 6 seconds left to break all the Raiders fans' hearts. And Philip Lindsay, an underrated prospect to start the season, another big game for the Broncos, led them in rushing, I believe 100-plus yards, and that was enough to bring the Broncos over the Raiders, who, shocker, without Khalil Mack, do not get any pass rush at all on any team, unless maybe they're playing the Giants or Seahawks offensive line. Now we move to the Sunday night football game, the New York Football Giants at the Dallas Cowboys.
The Giants did drop this one 20-13, and the lack of offensive line for the Giants showed. Saquon did almost nothing on the ground, so they had to resort to using him as a pass catcher. He caught 14 of 15 targets, and I think that's going to be the story this year for the Giants.
Yeah, it seemed like 3-yard check down to Saquon Barkley was the story, or at least the game plan for the Giants offense. It was another week where they couldn't score a touchdown in the first half. Barkley 28 rushing yards. Odell Beckham was quiet. Eli was getting hit out of his mind. That will happen with an Eric Flowers-led offensive line. Dak Prescott on the Dallas side had an early deep touchdown to Tavon Austin, and from there they just kind of rode Zeke. Played some, I don't want to call it conservative offense, but they didn't hit many deep shots like that the rest of the game.
The Dak Prescott-led offense is naturally conservative offense.
You could say that. And now the final game of the Week 2 slate, the Seattle Seahawks visit Soldier Field to face the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football.
I'll let my co-host take the lead here as the Bears fan, but my only thing was the Bears looked very good on defense. Khalil Mack is proving his worth on the defense, giving that pass rush and that fear. But Shaquille Griffin had 2 interceptions for the Seahawks. That was about the only bright spot of the game for them.
Yeah, the Bears defense, like my co-host mentioned, looked dominant. Khalil Mack made his presence known again. Russell Wilson was sacked 6 times and threw a pick 6. I believe I saw a graphic that was the first pick 6 he threw in his NFL career, which is odd considering the volume of throws he has to make in that offense. But let's say Bears defense is storyline number 1 of that game. Storyline number 2, Mitchell Trubisky did not play well at all in that game. The offensive play calling looked good from the coaching perspective. They put him in good opportunities, but he was missing open receivers. He was making bad reads. He was holding the ball too long. The surrounding pieces look to be there for the Bears, but it's going to be on Mitchell Trubisky to see if that team can take the next step and actually be in playoff contention, because that defense looks like it could be special.
So that wraps up our Week 2 NFL recap. So now we're just going to move into the Josh Gordon trade, where Josh Gordon was traded to the New England Patriots for a 5th rounder. And if Josh Gordon does not suit up for 10 games for the Patriots will receive an additional 7th rounder from the Browns.
Yeah, and Josh Gordon going to the Patriots, if he can be clean, it's a big story. It re-energizes that offense a lot. It gives them an actual threat, a wide receiver who can run more than the intermediate routes they have some of their receivers run. From Brady's perspective, it's probably the most talented wide receiver he's gotten to throw to since Randy Moss, and I'm not making any other comparisons from Josh Gordon to Randy Moss other than that they were troubled, talented wide receivers. They're still on completely different levels, but Josh Gordon is still that talent that if he can get himself going, stay clean, get in the right mindset, can be big in that offense.
People forget just how good Josh Gordon was. In 2013, he averaged over 110 yards receiving per game. And this is a very low risk, but also potentially very high reward trade for the Patriots. Another very smart Bill Belichick move, and I definitely think this is something that even if he doesn't perform like he did with the Browns, he still takes a lot of attention off other players like Gronk, and when Edelman gets back and Chris Hogan, that opens up the offense more for Tom Brady.
And people probably don't say this often. I think it was a pretty good move for the Browns too. Just get rid of that mess. You've been enabling him over and over for years. Just get some closure there, move on. It's probably the best thing for your football team. Now, after that whole debacle and discussion about the Josh Gordon trade, we move into our segments for the week. The first being performance of the week, and we have a couple consensus performances of the week.
The first consensus is obviously Patrick Mahomes. I talked about already. 326 yards, 6 touchdowns to beat the Steelers by 5 points. And over his first 2 games, he got 592 yards passing with 10 touchdowns. And his 10 touchdowns to start the year are the most by any player in NFL history to start a season.
And repeat performance of the week, consensus-wise, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The Fitzmagic stayed on this week. Fitzpatrick went 27 for 33, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception against the defending Super Bowl champions. And for that reason, he's on our performance of the week for the second week in a row.
Now, our individual performance of the week, I actually have Kirk Cousins. Although his numbers, they looked very good. They weren't especially fantastic. 425 yards, 4 touchdowns. People remember this game for the tie and for the Clay Matthews roughing the passer call. But Kirk Cousins really showed why the Vikings are legitimate Super Bowl contenders with him under there. A lot of people have been focusing on the hot start of Pat Mahomes and Fitzmagic, but Kirk Cousins has looked very good in making this Vikings team a very dangerous team come playoff time.
Yeah, my performance of the week was a little bit more under the radar. Darius Leonard, the rookie linebacker for the Indianapolis Colts, he played college ball at South Carolina State, so a small school. He had 18 tackles, 15 of them being solo tackles, a sack, a forced fumble, and a pass defended against the Washington Redskins this week. He locked down the running game against the Washington Redskins, couldn't get anything moving, and he was a large part of that win for the Indianapolis Colts.
On to our next segment, we have Stat of the Week.
Yeah, my stat of the week, pretty simple one, but I still thought it was interesting. Michael Thomas has the most receptions in NFL history for a player through his first 2 games at 28 receptions. He's been a large part of the Saints offense, even though it has struggled a little bit to this point this season. Huge part of it, catching balls from Drew Brees like no other. And like the stat says, no one in NFL history can put up the reception numbers he can through 2 games.
Literally like no other. Drew Brees has never had a Pro Bowl wide receiver until Michael Thomas came around. Marquise Colston never made a Pro Bowl. So Drew Brees has been doing what he does, going to be all-time leader in passing yards, and Michael Thomas at age 38 was his first Pro Bowl wide receiver. My stat of the week, since 1940, NFL teams scoring 37-plus points at home with 0 turnovers were 386-0 entering Sunday. And the Pittsburgh Steelers scored 37 points and had 0 turnovers and lost, making their record in NFL history 386-1.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Big Ben walks into the locker room after the game, much like Drew Brees in Week 1. It's like, defense, this is on you. I don't know what else I was supposed to do. Now, next segment, our underrated performance of the week. I'll start that one off. I'm going with Blake Bortles, a quarterback who probably gets more hate than about any other quarterback in the NFL, and I probably before this year or a couple of games last year would have said rightfully so because he looked horrible to start his career. But this week against the Patriots, 377 yards, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception, and only 1 interception is a big thing for him. In a prove-it game against the Patriots, they proved, or at least he proved, that he's capable of leading a team against elite competition, and that could prove vital come another playoff run for the Jaguars.
My underrated performance of the week is not a single performance. It is actually Frank Gore in his whole career now. He just moved in to 4th all-time on NFL rushing leaders, the all-time NFL rushing leaders with 14,112 yards. And it seems like nobody's paying attention to him. I mean, he's passed guys like Eric Dickerson, LaDainian Tomlinson, and people are just kind of forgetting about him because he's been on 2 different teams now after he left the 49ers, and I just think he needs to get more recognition for what he's doing.
Yeah, future Hall of Famer for sure for Frank Gore. That kind of ties into our next segment and my pick for it, the surprise of the week. My surprise is that the Miami Dolphins are 2-0. I touched on it a little bit earlier. They've beaten the Titans and the Jets so far this year. Not great wins, but wins nonetheless. I just can't believe that they started 2-0. I expected nothing out of the Dolphins team this year. I still don't expect much for them down the road this season, but a 2-0 start has surprised me thus far.
My surprise of the week, it's another type of stat. Matthew Stafford was the first quarterback in NFL history with 300 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, and then to lose the game. That really surprised me because it seems like people do that all the time. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's good, but it's nothing spectacular. But they've never lost a game. That's really something that surprised me this week.
Yeah, without throwing an interception, that's probably the key in that one. Moving on to our next segment, Clown of the Week, and I'll let my co-host start that one first.
I'm sure just about everybody's heard about this by now. Vontae Davis retired at halftime of the Bills' loss to the Chargers this week. He reportedly said after the Bills were going out for halftime, he said his body could not do it anymore, and that it was his awakening that he could not perform at this level, and he retired. He didn't play the second half. He didn't come out with the team, and apparently none of his teammates knew that either. They all assumed that everything was normal, and the Bills are so bad they're making players quit now. I know it's a cliche, just like everyone's saying how bad the Bills are, but really in the middle at halftime, Clown of the Week for sure.
I don't blame this one on the Bills as much I blame it on Vontae Davis. You can't quit on your teammates and your coaches at halftime. If you want to retire after the game, sit on the sideline the rest of the second half, support your teammates, and then say, I'm done. Why would you quit or retire, whatever he wants to call it, at the half of the game, second game of the season, and just tell your teammates, I'm out? So my own Clown of the Week, or Clowns of the Week as it turns out, are NFL kickers this week. A wide variety of poor performance kicking-wise this week, led by Zane Gonzalez, like we've said, missed 4 kicks, 2 field goals, 2 extra points. It was so bad that the Browns fans actually had held kicking tryouts in New Orleans after the game last week. That just sums up Cleveland football right there. Another poor performance, Daniel Carlson missed 3 field goals for the Vikings, cost them that game, or at least was a part of losing that game, or tying that game, sorry. And then each of those two missed a game-winning field goal, and each of those two are now unemployed. I don't know if we'll see them get kicking jobs ever again.
And the Vikings signed Dan Bailey, the second most accurate kicker in football history, and I think that the Cowboys cutting him to save some money really, not obviously the Cowboys haven't had too many issues, but it just shows how valuable a kicker can be when it comes to contributing wins.
Now, final segment of the week before we get to our power rankings, the worst headlines we've seen of the week. I'll lead this one off. My headline reads, quote, "The Patriots dynasty has come to an end." I mean, I think I Googled this after I read the headline. I found an article with something along those sorts coming in each of the past 6 or 7 years. Everyone, after an early season loss, says that the Patriots dynasty is dead, that Brady looks old, that the regime there, it looks tired. It's just, I don't think it's even happened this year yet. I think the Patriots they're still one of the top teams in the league. They lost to a playoff opponent on the road. I don't know what the big deal is, why you're saying the Patriots dynasty is coming to an end. They're still an elite team, an elite franchise, and they'll still be probably in the AFC Championship game, if not the Super Bowl.
My worst headline of the week, it was just in a Bleacher Report article. It's talking about how David Johnson is a bust this season after his breakout year in 2016. That's just ridiculous. It's been 2 games, and the Cardinals have been bad, yes, and he hasn't been fantastic, but you're really going to say that a player who had over 2,000 scrimmage yards just 1.5, technically 2 years ago now is a bust already? That's just terrible.
Now, after we get away from those atrocious headlines, we move to our power rankings for this week. I'll start off first at number 5, moving up in my power rankings, entering the top 5, the Kansas City Chiefs. They struggled on defense, yes, but it was an elite offensive performance, especially from Patrick Mahomes. He was spreading the ball to all his targets, really spreading the ball around. Watkins got involved, Hill got involved, Kelsey had a big game after a slow week 1. If they can keep this going, they're certainly a playoff team and a dangerous offense.
My number 5 team, I have the Atlanta Falcons. I had them in there last week after they lost to the Eagles. I still think that they're definitely have one of the most talented offenses in football. Their defense is coming around, and I still think they're a top 5 team for sure.
My number 4, even after a loss to the New England Patriots, still got Tom Brady. It was a tough loss on the road, yes, but I don't think it's anything to be super discouraged about. They add Josh Gordon, and we'll see if he turns out well for them, but even if he doesn't, they've still got weapons there. Edelman's coming back soon. It's still Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. They're still an elite team, and I have them at number 4.
My number 4 team, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who's beat the New England Patriots. I just think not only did their defense prove why it's the best in football, Blake Bortles showed competence against, like he said earlier, an elite team, and I think that puts the Jaguars ahead of the Patriots right now.
Yeah, I would say the Jaguars are ahead of the Patriots right now too, which is why I have them at number 3 in my power rankings. Elite defense, quarterback that looks to be improving and not a turnover-prone mistake machine anymore, actually can lead a team to wins. And yeah, it was just a good win against a good football team at home. That's why they're number 3 in my power rankings.
It's maybe a little controversial, but I have the Eagles at number 3. And when you're doing power rankings, you got to rank who you think is the best team in football. And now that Carson Wentz is back, I think the Eagles are the 3rd best team in football, at least right now. I think they could be even better once they get Alshon Jeffrey back. I mean, that defense is underrated because people are focusing on how talented the Rams and Vikings and Jaguars are. The Eagles still have a very talented defense, and they have a lot of playmakers on offense. They have a few running backs that can contribute in different ways, and they have a good offensive line. So I think the Eagles are number 3 right now.
Yeah, number 2 on my power rankings, the Minnesota Vikings, despite the tie. I think, honestly, they addressed their biggest weakness this week, and that is the kicking game. They signed Dan Bailey, super accurate kicker. It's a wonder. I mean, it's due to the financial aspect, but that he was released from the Cowboys. But there's no glaring weakness anymore for the Vikings. They've got everything on offense, a superb defense, special teams is coming together. It looks like it's going to be a good rest of the year for the Minnesota Vikings, and I have them at number 2 in my power rankings.
My number 2 team, I also have the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins looked fantastic last week, and as I said earlier, the addition of him really shows that they are the class of the NFC along with the Rams. So I definitely think that the Vikings are a solid number 2 and would be number 1 most years if there wasn't another team ahead of them this caliber.
So no surprise, Rams after 34-0 victory are still number 1 in my power rankings. Just like I mentioned earlier, everything looks good so far for them. Special teams, offense. Even though Greg Zuerlein got injured. We'll see if he comes back. Big game for the offense, big game for the defense. Just an all-around good football team, and that's why they're number one in my power rankings.
I also have the Rams. He said it all. Most talented team in football, and there's not much to say. They've been dominating so far. There's no reason to think they're anything but one at this point.
Now we finish our podcast this week with our Week 3 picks. Just before that, we'll review our records from last week. I actually went 9-7 with my picks from last week.
I unfortunately went down from my 7-9 last week to a 6-10, and I'm now 13-19 overall. But I'm not worried still.
Yes, long season to go. You can have a lot more losing picks to go this season, so you're fine. Now, moving on to our Week 3 game picks, we'll start off on Thursday Night Football, the much-anticipated New York Jets at Cleveland Browns matchup.
The winless streak is over. I am taking Tyrod Taylor and the Cleveland Browns to win their first game since 2016.
I second that motion. Cleveland Browns facing a far less talented team than what they've done thus far. I think it's going to be enough for the Browns to get a win this week.
This is their chance. I really hope they don't go full Browns and win the game or lose the game.
Next up on the slate, the New Orleans Saints against the division rival Atlanta Falcons.
I was very high on the Saints coming into this year, but the defense looked like it's taken a major step back, so I'm taking the Falcons in this game.
Yeah, I'll take the Falcons in this game as well. Offense will look good at home against a shaky, to this point, Saints defense. Moving on, the San Francisco 49ers go to Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs.
I've picked against my Chiefs 2 weeks in a row now, so I'm done with it. So I'm picking the Chiefs to take their first home game of the year.
Yeah, Garoppolo falls to 1-2, this year. Chiefs offense gets it done this game. Next game on the slate, John Gruden tries to get his first win in his second stint with the Raiders as the Raiders visit Miami to face the so far undefeated Dolphins.
I really almost took the Raiders, but I'm going with the Miami Dolphins to start the season 3-0.
Just win, baby. I think the Raiders get it done this week. Get a win, and we'll see if that helps at all on this so far disastrous season. Next game up, the atrocious-looking Buffalo Bills against the phenomenal-looking Minnesota Vikings.
I am taking the Vikings to win this game.
Yeah, I'm taking the Vikings as well. I'm not giving it any analysis. It's the Vikings and the Bills.
I think we need to set that both of us have to pick the Bills for at least one game at some point this year. So we're just going to set that now. We both have to pick the Bills at least once.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Next game up, the Indianapolis Colts against the Philadelphia Eagles in Carson Wentz's season debut.
I have the Eagles taking this one. Carson Wentz probably won't be pushing the ball downfield like he did last year, but I think it'll be a good warm-up game for him against a very poor Colts defense, so I have the Eagles winning this one.
Yeah, I'm also going to have the Eagles. I think he'll spark the offense a little bit. Defense, hopefully for Eagles fans' sake, plays a little better this week. They're not going against Fitzmagic, so there's not a whole lot to worry about, but yeah, Eagles are going to win this game. Moving on, the Green Bay Packers at the Washington Redskins.
If this was week 2, I think I would have picked the Redskins here, but with how bad the Redskins looked last week against the Colts, I am taking one-legged Aaron Rodgers to beat the Redskins this week.
Yes, I'm also taking one-legged Aaron Rodgers. After a good showing in week 1, Adrian Peterson actually looked old this game, so I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers no matter how many body parts he has full mobility in. Next game up, the so far undefeated Cincinnati Bengals visit Carolina to face the Panthers.
The Red Rifle will be undefeated no longer. I am taking the Carolina Panthers in this one.
Yeah, I'll take the Panthers in their defense, who looked a little bit shaky last week, but I think at home it'll help them. Hopefully offense looks a little better, especially running the ball for the Panthers. I'll take the Panthers over the Bengals. Next game up, with Mariota's health a question, the Tennessee Titans go to Saxonville to play the Jaguars.
I will be taking the Jaguars in this game. I don't think Blaine Gabbert's going to be doing much, and even if Mariota plays, he's not going to be able to do much against this defense.
Yeah, try running your cute Wildcat stuff against the Jacksonville defense. I don't think it'll be particularly close in this game. I'll take the Jaguars. Moving on, the Denver Broncos against the Baltimore Ravens.
I am taking the Broncos in this game on the road in Baltimore. I just think that the Denver defense is going to fluster Joe Flacco, and I think Broncos are going to take this one.
Even though the Broncos are undefeated this year, I'm not really buying them to this point. I think they've gotten a little bit lucky. I hate using the term lucky, but things have gone their way in the first 2 games. I think Baltimore Ravens are going to end their winning streak, get a win at home in Baltimore. Next game up, the both winless New York Giants at the Houston Texans.
I have the Texans taking their first game here. Deshaun Watson's going to look improved from his last week against the Giants defense.
Yep, same reasons and same pick. Watson's going to look improved against this defense. Texans defense is going to wreak havoc on that offensive line led by J.J. Watt. Next game up, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Los Angeles Rams in the battle for Los Angeles.
I am taking the Los Angeles Chargers to win this game.
Wow.
I think the Rams are the better team. I just think the Chargers are going to be motivated now to prove their worth after losing the Chiefs in Week 1.
Now, I don't think there's any real home field advantage for this game. It's pretty much neutral fields, and neither team really draws that huge a crowd despite how good they are. I'm going to take the Rams in this game, most talented team in football, and all three levels are working well so far for this team. I'm going to take the Rams. Next game up, the Chicago Bears at the Arizona Cardinals.
I'm taking the Bears in this one. Sam Bradford stays winless as the Cardinals starter, and Josh Rosen is knocking on the door.
Yeah, I'm taking the Bears as well. Cardinals offense isn't going to do much against the Bears defense, and hopefully for the Bears' sake, Trubisky actually looks like a functioning starting NFL quarterback this week. Next game up, last of the Sunday afternoon games, the Dallas Cowboys at the Seattle Seahawks.
I'm taking the Seahawks to win their first game of 2018. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be ugly, but I think Russell Wilson's going to be able to will the Seahawks to a victory.
I'm taking the Cowboys in this game. I just don't trust the Seattle offense aside from Russell Wilson. He's been forcing some plays. The defense isn't quite what it was in the Legion of Boom era. The Seahawks are falling a little bit this season. I'm going to take the Cowboys. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, New England Patriots against Matt Patricia. Patricia looking for his first NFL win as a head coach for the Detroit Lions against his former employer, the New England Patriots.
Patriots are going to take this one pretty handily, I think.
Yeah, especially coming off a loss. I think the Patriots offense will go off in this game. Not looking good for Detroit this week, taking the Patriots. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I'm taking the Steelers in this one. I said last week I think Fitzmagic is over. I think Fitzmagic is actually over this week. Steelers are going to take this one.
I'm a believer in Fitzmagic. I'm taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to move to 3-0 this week. Fitzmagic is for real.
And that wraps up our Week 3 NFL podcast. Make sure you check down in the description for timestamps, and I will also link our Twitter. Make sure you follow us on there. I'm Reed.
I'm Robert.
And we'll see you next week.